The shadow returns. The crimson sky above Nexus 7 blazed with artificial fireworks as millions of Zephyrians celebrated the 300th anniversary of the Great Cleansing. Towering spires of crystalline architecture caught the light, casting rainbow patterns across the vast plazas where citizens gathered in jubilant crowds. Holographic displays showed the glorious moment when the last human ships had been driven from the Kepler sector, banished to the dark void beyond known space. High Regent Vextar stood on the observation deck of the central spire, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of triumph. His chitinous skin gleamed with ceremonial oils, and his compound eyes reflected the celebration below. Today marked not just victory, but the complete dominance of Zephyrian civilization across 17 star systems. 3 centuries of peace, he announced to his assembled council, his voice resonating through translation devices. 3 centuries without human chaos, without their reckless expansion, without their dangerous unpredictability. The crowd below chanted in unison, their voices creating a harmonic resonance that vibrated through the city's crystal structures. Children who had never seen a human, whose grandparents had only heard stories, celebrated the exile of a species they knew only as legend. At exactly 14:27 local time, the sky changed. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't subtle. One moment, the afternoon sun cast its warm glow across the celebration, and the next, a shadow fell across the southern hemisphere. The shadow was vast, metallic, and impossibly silent. The crowd's chanting faltered, then died. Completely. Millions of compound eyes turned upward to witness something that should have been impossible. In the upper atmosphere, blocking out a section of sky larger than their largest city, hung a ship. It wasn't Zephyrian. It wasn't any known design from their allied species. The vessel was angular, scarred, and bore the unmistakable aesthetic of human engineering. But humans had been gone for 3 centuries. Their worlds had been monitored, their exile enforced by the strongest fleet in the sector. High Regent Vextar's celebration wine fell from his trembling hands, shattering on the crystal floor. His mandibles clicked in distress as he stared at the impossible sight. The ship was massive, easily 10 times larger than their most powerful dreadnought, and it hung in orbit as if it had always been there. Impossible, he whispered, his translator amplifying the word across the suddenly silent plaza. Aboard the human warship Terra's Wrath, Admiral Sarah Chen stood calmly at the bridge's viewport, her weathered hands clasped behind her back. At 58, she had spent most of her life in the void between stars, leading the remnants of humanity through the long exile. Her short grey hair was pulled back in a regulation cut, and her uniform bore the patches of a dozen forgotten Earth colonies. "Echo, begin the broadcast," she said quietly to the air round her. "Confirmed, Admiral," came the reply from the ship's artificial intelligence. Isiko's voice was warm, almost human, but carried the subtle harmonics that marked it as something beyond organic intelligence. Planetary communication networks are remarkably easy to access. Their security protocols haven't evolved much in 3 centuries. Captain Joss Rivera, Chun's tactical officer, looked up from her console with a slight smile. Rivera represented the new generation of humanity, born in exile but raised on stories of Earth and the home they'd never seen. "Ma'am, their orbital defense platforms are powering up. Shall I activate countermeasures?" "Not yet, Captain. We're not here to fight. We're here to remind them of something they've forgotten." Every screen across Nexus 7 flickered. Personal devices, massive public displays, even the holographic banners celebrating the anniversary. all shifted to show the same simple message. A countdown timer, reading 4 o'clock, ticking down second by second. No explanation, no demands, no threats. Just for minutes, the panic was immediate and absolute. 3 centuries of peace had made the Zephyrians complacent. They had no protocols for this, no emergency procedures for the impossible. In the central spire, military commanders ran through corridors that had never known the sound of combat boots. Analysis, Vextar shrieked, his ceremonial composure completely shattered. How did they penetrate our sensor grid? Where did they come from? General Klickstar, the sector's military commander, consulted his tactical display with shaking hands. High Regent, the ship. It's not showing on any of our deep space monitoring stations. It's as if it materialized from nothing. Ships don't materialize from nothing. Vexter's voice cracked. Scan for cloaking technology. Check for wormhole. Signatures. Find me answers. But the answers were already there, hidden in the ship's very presence. The Terra's wrath hadn't used cloaking technology or wormhole generation. It had done something far more sophisticated. It had been waiting. Echo Admiral Chen said, watching the chaos unfold on the planet below, show them the network. Across the Kepler sector, on 17 different worlds, in mining stations and research facilities, in the depths of gas giant processing plants and the corridors of asteroid habitats, dormant systems began to wake up. Systems that had been installed by human workers, maintained by human engineers, upgraded by human technicians over the course of 3 centuries. The Zephyrians had exiled humanity, but they hadn't been able to erase 300 years of human presence in the sector. Every piece of infrastructure, every computer network, every communication relay had been touched by human hands. And those hands had been very, very careful about what they left behind. My God, Captain Rivera breathed, watching her tactical display as friendly signals began appearing throughout the sector. They're everywhere. We never left, Admiral Chen replied simply. We just learned to be invisible. The countdown on Nexus 7 reached 3 o'clock, and the planet's power grid began to fluctuate. Not fail, not collapse, but fluctuate in a pattern that spelled out a message in the old Earth binary code that only humans would recognize. We remember. In the deepest bunkers of the central spire, emergency sessions convened. The sector's leadership, species that had celebrated human exile for 3 centuries, now faced the terrifying reality that their former subjects had never truly left. Every trade agreement, every construction project, every technological upgrade had been influenced by human hands working in the shadows. The humans, Vexter said, his voice hollow, they've been here all along. Not just here, General Klickstar reported, his mandibles clicking in distress. Sir, we're receiving signals from every system in the sector. They're everywhere. The timer reached 2 o'clock, and across the sector, human voices began to speak. Not threats, not demands, but testimonies. Voices of the exiled, speaking, in languages that hadn't been heard in Zephyrian space for 3 centuries. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, came the first voice, broadcast from a hidden facility in the Kepler 442 system. I was 8 years old when you drove us from our homes. I watched my parents die in the refugee ships, overcrowded and undersupplied. But I survived. We all survived. Another voice from a different world. I am engineer Marcus Thompson. For 50 years, I've maintained your fusion reactors, upgraded your computer systems, kept your cities running. You never knew I was human. You never knew I was the child of the people you exiled. The voices multiplied, hundreds of them, then thousands. 3 centuries of hidden human presence, 3 centuries of exile survivors and their descendants, all speaking at once. The Zephyrians, who had celebrated the elimination of human chaos, discovered that human order had been supporting their civilization all along. Admiral Chen watched the countdown reach 1:30 and finally spoke directly to the planet below. Her voice, calm and measured, cut through the chaos of the thousands of testimonies. People of Nexus 7, citizens of the Zephyrian Empire, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Exile Fleet. You are not under attack. You are not in danger. You are simply being reminded of something you chose to forget. The plaza below had emptied, but Chen knew that every citizen was watching from their homes, their workplaces, their shelters. The countdown continued. 1 o'clock, 300 years ago, you exiled us for being unpredictable, for being chaotic, for being dangerous. You told yourselves that you were bringing peace to the galaxy, but you forgot something important about humans. The timer reached 0:45. We adapt. At 0:30, the Terra's wrath was no longer alone. Across the sector, other ships began to decloak, to power up, to reveal themselves. Not an invasion fleet, but a network of guardians that had been watching, waiting, protecting the very people who had exiled them. We've been your engineers, your technicians, your maintenance crews, Chen continued. We've kept your cities running, your ships flying, your children safe, not because we had to, but because it was right. The countdown reached 0:15. We never wanted to be your conquerors. We only wanted to be your neighbors. At 0:10, every screen in the sector displayed the same image, the blue marble of Earth, as seen from space, with the simple caption, Home. The timer reached 0:05. You exiled us to teach us humility. Instead, you taught us patience. 0:04. You scattered us to make us weak. Instead, you made us everywhere. 0:03. You tried to erase us from history. Instead, you made us history's authors. 0:02. Today, the exile ends, not through conquest, but through recognition. 0. You welcome to the new age of cooperation. 0 o'clock, asterisk. When 4 minutes changes everything, the silence that followed the countdown was absolute. Across 17 star systems, millions of beings stared at their screens, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The Zephyrian Empire, which had celebrated the exile of humanity for 3 centuries, now faced the reality that their former subjects had never truly left. Admiral Chen remained on the bridge of the Terra's wrath, watching the planet below with eyes that had seen too much history. The ship's massive bulk cast its shadow across the capital city, but she knew the real shadow was the one that had been cast over human hearts for 300 years. Echo, status report, she said quietly. All network nodes are active, Admiral. The AI responded. 17 systems reporting. Hidden facilities operational. Exile fleet converging on the Nexus system. No hostile actions detected from Zephyrian forces. Captain Rivera looked up from her console, her young face showing the wonder of someone witnessing history. Ma'am, we're receiving messages from across the sector. Humans are. They're coming forward, revealing themselves. Chen nodded. She had expected this. For 3 centuries, humans had lived in the shadows of Zephyrian society, disguising themselves, hiding their true nature, contributing to civilizations that had rejected them. But the signal from the Terra's wrath had been more than just a countdown. It had been a call to come home. On Nexus 7, High Regent Vextar stood in his emergency command center, surrounded by advisors whose compound eyes reflected the panic of their species. The holographic displays showed the same impossible truth. From every angle, humans were everywhere in their empire, had always been everywhere, working in positions of trust and responsibility. "How many?" he asked, his voice barely audible. General Clickstar consulted his tactical readouts with trembling hands. "Preliminary estimates suggest millions, High Regent. Maybe tens of millions. They're in our infrastructure, our maintenance crews, our technical departments. Some of them are in positions of significant authority." 3 centuries, Vextar whispered. "They've been here for 3 centuries, and we never knew." "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Nottle, "we're receiving a direct transmission from the human warship. Admiral Chen is requesting permission to address the High Council." Vextar's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Permission? They have a ship the size of a city hanging over our capital, and they're asking for permission." "Yes, sir, they're following diplomatic protocols." This was perhaps the most shocking revelation of all. After 3 centuries of exile, after the dramatic appearance of their impossible warship, the humans were still observing proper diplomatic procedures. They hadn't come as conquerors. They had come as neighbors, seeking recognition. "Grant the request," Vextar said finally. "If we're going to face the end of our civilization, we might as well do it with dignity." The main display in the command center flickered, then resolved into the image of a human woman in a dark blue uniform. Admiral Chen looked older than most Sephorians had ever seen a human. Her gray hair and weathered face speaking of decades spent in the void between stars. But her eyes were kind, and her expression was one of patient determination rather than anger. "High Regent Vextar," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through suffering. "I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, commander of the Terran Exile Fleet. I thank you for accepting this communication." Admiral Vextar replied, struggling to maintain his composure. "Your demonstration has been most effective. What do you want?" Chen smiled, an expression that seemed to light up the command center. "We want what we've always wanted, High Regent. We want to come home." "Home," Vextar's voice cracked. "You were exiled for the security of the sector. Humans are unpredictable, chaotic, dangerous. The records clearly show. The records show." "What the victors chose to record," Chen interrupted gently. "But let me share what really happened 3 centuries ago." The display changed, showing archived footage that the Zephyrian government had classified for 300 years. Scenes of human colonies, not as chaotic wastelands, but as thriving communities. Human engineers working alongside Zephyrian technicians, human doctors treating Zephyrian patients, human teachers educating Zephyrian children. The exile wasn't about security, Chen continued. It was about competition. Human colonies were outproducing Zephyrian worlds. Human innovation was advancing faster than your established systems. Human adaptability was solving problems that had stymied your species for generations. Vextar stared at the images, his worldview crumbling. That's not what we were told. No, it's not. Your leadership 3 centuries ago made a choice. They could compete with humanity, or they could eliminate the competition. They chose elimination. The display shifted again, showing the Exodus ships, overcrowded and barely functional, carrying millions of humans into the void. But then it showed something else. The hidden installations, the camouflaged facilities, the human engineers who had volunteered to stay behind and maintain the infrastructure that kept Zephyrian civilization running. "We never abandoned the sector," Chen said. "We just learned to be invisible. For 3 centuries, humans have been your mechanics, your programmers, your maintenance crews. We've kept your cities running, your ships flying, your children safe, not because we were forced to, but because it was the right thing to do." "Captain." Rivera stepped forward, her young face earnest. "High Regent, my grandmother was born on Kepler 442 in one of the human colonies. She was 12 when the exile ships came. She watched her friends, her teachers, her neighbors being loaded onto transports like cargo, but she also watched my grandfather, who was an engineer, choose to stay behind. He spent his life maintaining the fusion reactors that power your cities. I was born in exile, but I grew up on stories of the home we never forgot. The truth was overwhelming. 3 centuries of celebrating human exile, 3 centuries of believing they had created peace through elimination, and all the while, human hands had been building and maintaining the very foundation of their civilization." "Echo," Admiral Chen said, "show them the network." The display expanded to show the entire Kepler sector, 17 star systems connected by a web of hidden human installations, mining stations run by human engineers, communication relays maintained by human technicians, emergency response systems designed by human programmers, an entire shadow infrastructure that had been protecting and supporting Zephyrian civilization for 3 centuries. "We call it the Covenant Network," Chen explained, "named after the promise our ancestors made that no matter how they were treated, humans would never abandon their responsibility to preserve life and civilization." General Clickstar leaned forward, his tactical mind grappling with the implications. "Admiral, the scope of this network, you could have crippled our entire civilization at any time." "Yes," Chen agreed simply, "but we didn't, because that's not who we are." The command center fell silent. Every Zephyrian present was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The species they had feared and exiled had been protecting them all. "Along what happens now?" Vextar asked, his voice small. "Now," Chen said, "we start over. The exile ends today. Humans across the sector are revealing themselves, stepping out of the shadows. Some will choose to return to the colony worlds. Others will stay where they are, but as recognized citizens rather than hidden refugees. And some, like myself, will work to build a new relationship between our species." "A new relationship," Vextar repeated. "You're not demanding our surrender." "Our submission, High Regent. For 3 centuries, we've been your partners in everything but name. We've shared your successes, your challenges, your growth. We don't want to conquer you. We want to work with you openly, as equals." The display showed the Terra's Wrath and the other ships of the exile fleet, no longer hidden but visible in the light of 17 different suns. They were massive, advanced, clearly capable of overwhelming any defense the Zephyrians could mount. But they made no aggressive moves, issued no ultimatums. The 4 minutes, Rivera added, weren't a countdown to attack. They were a countdown to revelation, for minutes for your people to understand that the peace they've enjoyed was built on human sacrifice and human dedication. Chen stood, her image commanding the attention of every being in the command center. "High Regent, the Terran exile fleet hereby formally requests recognition as a sovereign entity within the Kepler sector. We propose the establishment of diplomatic relations between our peoples, the creation of joint colonies, and the sharing of technology and resources for the benefit of all species. You're asking for what you could simply take, Vextar said, wonder in his voice. We're asking for what we've always wanted, to be part of something larger than ourselves, to contribute to the growth and prosperity of civilized space, to be partners in building a future where no species faces exile for being different. The silence stretched for long moments. Finally, Vextar spoke, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of history. Admiral Chen, on behalf of the Zephyr Empire and the Kepler Sector Alliance, I accept your proposal. The exile is ended. Welcome home. As the Terra's wrath settled into a peaceful orbit around Nexus 7, its massive bulk no longer a threat but a symbol of protection, the Kepler sector began to change. The age of exile was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and in the depths of space, where the exile ships had first carried humanity into the void, ancient listening posts picked up the signal and began to broadcast it toward the distant stars where Earth's children waited. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of 3 centuries of hope. Come home. The exile is over. Come home.